To run Flexdata, simply double-click on the Flexdata icon on your desktop. You might need to do a login to the cloud with an ID and a password. The Flexdata window has buttons on the upper left side to view experiments and to view the equipment. There are buttons on the lower left side to view alerts and settings. First, we will install the equipment in Flexdata. Click on the equipment page and you will see the possible equipment: DM motor units, DR motor unit, Kethley meters, Hioki meters, and cameras. I will install 3 motor units, an HP, a DLDM, and a DR. The settings for the HB would be the same as the settings for the DLDM. Although I do not have a DR at the moment, I will go through the setup to show how it is done. To install my HP, I need to click on Endurance Machine DM. The page will be blank the first time you do this. Click on Add and some blanks will be presented. Click in the address window to give the IP address of the HP motor unit. In my case, it is 192.168.2.151, and then click on Connect. The HP is installed. In the window above the IP address, you can change the label or name of the motor. In my case, I will call it HP1. Below the IP address, you can set up a template for the motor. You might have more than one motor unit, and you might want to have them set up differently. I will simply type in HP. The items slow speed, slow timeout, intermediate stop, and slowdown mode are for the HB or DLDM or TCDM, not for the HP. I will explain them when I set up my DLDM. In the bottom right corner, you can see the current speed, position, and status of the motor. You also can cause the motor unit to move to test the connection. Let me do that. I can see that the motor is moving, but you won't be able to see it yet. The installation of the HP is complete. Next, I will move to the DLDM. Click on Add below the HP1 motor. The IP address of the DLDM is 192.168.2.153, so I type that in the window and click on Connect, and my DLDM is installed. The HB and DLDM and TCDM have analog motors, and they behave differently from the HP, which has a stepping motor. If the analog motors are running at high speed and they are given a command to stop moving, they slow down and coast to a stop. They do not stop suddenly, and they will coast past the desired stopping point. The exact stopping point depends on the individual motor and jig. For an FS, the desired stopping point is when the sample is flat. At slow speeds, the HB will stop before it reaches the flat position. With UASA's sample software ECP, the motor was driven at 10 RPM for the final cycle before measurement, and the motor was kept alive until it reached the preferred stopping point. With Flexdata, you can slow the motor for the last cycle before measurement, and you can set that slow speed. This is the slowdown mode. To match the ECP software, the default slow speed has been set to 10 RPM. At slower speeds, the motor will stop before reaching the flat sample point, so you can specify a stop timeout to keep it moving until the sample is flat. That value is determined by testing your individual motor and jig. For my DLDM with the FS, I have measured it to be 500 milliseconds at 10 RPM. I will demonstrate that later after we have done the full setup of Flexdata. If you select intermediate stop, the motor will stop completely before it begins the slowdown cycle. So I set my DLDM template to be slow speed of 10 RPM, stop timeout to be 500 milliseconds, no intermediate stop, and slowdown mode checked. To set your analog motor and jig, simply try different timeouts to find the optimum value for your motor and jig. I will demonstrate this later after we have completed the Flexdata setup. In the bottom right corner, you can see the current speed, position, and status of the motor. You also can cause the motor unit to move to test the connection. Let me do that. I can see that the motor is moving, but you cannot see it yet. The DR installation is identical to the HP installation. Click on Endurance Machine DR, click on Add. Note that the IP address of 192.168.10.1 immediately appears. That is the only choice. I will change the label to DR. Only one DR can be used in an instance of Flexdata, but you can have a different setup. I will name this template DR. Click on Connect and the DR will connect. Because I do not have a DR attached, it shows connection timeout. However, it is fully set up. When I have a DR, all I will have to do is click on Connect and it will connect. Remember also when you use the DR that you will need to use a single Ethernet cable between the DR and the laptop, and you will need to change the laptop IP address to 192.168.10.xxx. I normally use 10 for XXX. There are other parameters that you can set with the DR. They are test angle plus and test angle minus and jog position. If you want to change them from the default, you can use a different DR template. To install a Kethley meter, click on Digital Multimeter Kethley on the equipment page. Click on Add. Kethley meters will show their serial numbers. Select the one that you want to install, then click on Connect. In my case, the Kethley meter is a DMM6500, so that's what I will type into the label window. If I had more than one, I would probably put a 1 after the first DMM6500. It can be helpful to set the DMM6500 template to be Use Front Panel. At the moment, the DMM6500 multiplexer is not supported by Flexdata, so you will always use Front Panel and Channel 1. Clicking on Front Panel grays out all channels but does put a check in Channel 1. You can set the type to be resistance or voltage or temperature. I use both resistance and voltage, so I set up two templates so I do not have to go back to the equipment page and change it. I will make one template be DMMR and a second template DMMV, changing the measurement type to voltage. If you have a Kethley DAQ6510 with a multiplexer, you can select front panel or not select front panel. If you do not select front panel, it will be set for the multiplexer, and you will need to click on the channels you wish to use. And you would need to select resistance or voltage or temperature for each of the channels. The setup for the DMM6500 and DAQ6510 are similar. On the right, you can see values of all the parameters. If you click on Test, it will show the value immediately. I have the clip leads on a 6-volt battery, so I will use the DMMV template. To install the Hioki RM3545-2, click on Digital Multimeter Hioki. The setup is the same as before. Click on Add and select the serial number of the Hioki you wish to use. Click on Connect. You can change the label for the meter. I set it to Hioki. You could set up a template for front panel, perhaps Hioki FP. I usually set the measurement speed too fast. And you could set a template for the multiplexer, perhaps Hioki MUX. I set the measurement speed to fast. For the MUX template, I will check Channel 1 and Channel 2. You can name the MUX channels. Normally, I would name the channels so I can easily identify each sample I am using. I have a liquid wire sample on each channel, but I will just leave the channel names blank for the moment. The Hioki RM3545-2 has an ambient temperature probe. You can click or unclick on temperature if you wish to use the ambient temperature in your data measurements. I have the clip leads on the two liquid wire samples, so I will use the Hioki MUX template. You see the ambient temperature at the bottom of the values. To install cameras, click on the equipment page, then on the camera page. Click on Add. Flexdata will scan for cameras. The second window down on the right side will show the cameras. Select the camera you want to install. Click on Connect, give it a name. I will use the Logitech C920 camera as my first selection. I will set a template for this camera calling it Logitech C920. When you click on Connect, you will see the camera video on the right. You can see the two liquid wire samples on the CS holding plates. My second choice will be the XP Cam. It shows as USB camera. Select it and click on Connect. And as before, I will set up a template for this camera. I will call it XP Cam. When you click on Connect, you can see the camera video on the right. This camera is monitoring the FS. I could install the laptop's built-in webcam, but I will not do that for the Flexdata setup video. You might find that you need it at some point though. The installation is identical to what we did for the first two cameras. I have found that I will often do a Zoom meeting while using Flexdata, so I prefer to leave the laptop's camera available for Zoom. You cannot do both. Now we have completed the installation of all the hardware that I will use in the Flexdata setup video.